Hi. In my previous video, Billy Bob, Peter Pan, and Jesus, the good news, I introduced Billy Bob and told you about some of his good characteristics and behaviors. I thought it best to let you think about his love and goodness for a bit before talking about some darker aspects of Billy Bobianity that might cause you to question whether Billy Bob is the savior for you. I figured hearing the good aspects might be more helpful to your attempt to believe in him. However, I feel obligated to give you the whole story, so you won't be shocked later on when you dig more deeply into the book about Billy Bob and learn about his ways that might seem unsavory if it weren't Billy Bob performing these acts. Also, Billy Bob might ask some weird things of you, so gird up your loins as we keep going. Things are about to get weird. Billy Bob's father is a little eccentric. Well, let's just be honest. He might seem to us be a little touched in the head. And Billy Bob said that he was just like his father and did only what he saw his father do. So when I talk about some of these behaviors that the father did or does, I will say that Billy Bob does them or has done them. After all, Billy Bob and his father are one. They're the same person. They have to be, otherwise we'd be worshiping two gods, and that can't be. There's only one God, and there's not another one besides him. So if Billy Bob is a god, and he is, then he has to be the same being as his father, even though he's obviously not. So let's get into it. Now, keep in mind, as I tell you about these actions and commands of Billy Bob, that he is always good, and nothing he does is evil. If his behavior seems wicked to you, the problem is in you, not in Billy Bob, who can do no wrong because he determines what is right and wrong. And wickedness is not wickedness when he performs it. Billy Bob is a respecter of persons. He hates some people and loves others, apparently just because. He chooses some people to do what he wants for good and some to do what he wants for evil. But even though he's the one who causes some to do evil for him, he is not to blame. The blame still falls on the person he created to do the evil and hardens their hearts in order to force them to do the evil. Since Billy Bob made us all, he has the right to make us to make you for dishonor and me for honor. You can't complain because you're forced to do evil and then Billy Bob won't take credit for the evil. Seriously, surely you know better than that. We're like people in a movie or a TV show. We play whatever part we're assigned. We're the protagonist or antagonist, depending on Billy Bob's will. Or we may simply be a peripheral player with no real significance at all. Hence, Billy Bob had a right to choose a certain man and bless that man, which he did. We'll call the man Abe. Billy Bob made sure Abe had lots of land and animals and other riches. Almost all throughout Billy Bob's book, Abe and his family are the special people. Well, until the end, but we'll get to that later. Everybody else is just extras in the story and can be dispensed with it without so much as a how do you do. It's like when we start watching a show and the first thing we see is a dead woman washed up on the beach. We don't care about her. She doesn't matter. Who she is or what she might want is not important to the story. Billy Bob even told Abe's family to steal land and jewels from other people. He also told his family to kill everybody living on the land he wanted Abe's family to have. This killing included children. Billy Bob wasn't and isn't pro-life at all. Abe's family often slaughtered people at Billy Bob's command. And if they left anyone alive, Billy Bob made sure they themselves were hacked to pieces for not murdering everybody he wanted murdered. Didn't matter if the person who refrained from murdering was a king. If he didn't murder the ones Billy Bob wanted murder, then he was murdered himself by Billy Bob's henchmen. Billy Bob considered other families to be like cattle or pigs. He told Abe's family to buy their neighbors. The ones they didn't murder. He said these people would be property of Abe's family. They could keep these slaves forever and even bequeath them to their children, like we bequeath land or houses or cars or whatever. Billy Bob sometimes became angry even with Abe's family. If they stepped out of line an inch, he might strike them dead by having the ground open up and swallow them, or forcing their family members even to draw their swords and kill them or stone them with stones. For instance, if they cursed, Billy Bob said the penalty was death. As you can see, Billy Bob has a temper problem, so we have to walk on eggshells around him. He's just super high-minded, so it's understandable that we get on his nerves with our shenanigans. Billy Bob created witches and wizards and sorcerers and necromancers, but he doesn't like that they exist. Billy Bob makes mistakes sometimes. He creates beings he wishes he hadn't made and puts people in power and later regrets his actions. He made one man a king over Abe's family, and then after finding out how the man acted as king, regretted setting the man up as king. Billy Bob also wished he'd never made humans at all. He drowned pretty much everybody at one time and commanded that witches and wizards all be murdered, even though he gave them the power to be witches and wizards. He had his reasons, I'm sure. It would have been nice if he could have seen the future, but sadly he could not and cannot, so he has to fix his mistakes. He'd never regret things and repent of things if he could see the future. But we can't expect Billy Bob to be perfect. Now, I don't know how to tell you this next thing. It's bizarre. Billy Bob wants you to eat him. He says you have to eat him. If you don't, he won't be inside you. Well, how could you be if you don't eat him? And if he's not inside you, then you're dead and don't have any life in you. I'm not sure if this next thing is worse, but hold on to your underwear. Billy Bob insists that you drink his blood like a vampire. I reckon his blood is special and somehow cleanses you so that Billy Bob can stand you. This isn't real, of course, so don't worry. It's all a game of pretense. You bake some special bread, buy it from the store, and also buy some grape juice, and you pretend the bread you eat is Billy Bob's body and the grape juice you drink is Billy Bob's blood. And even though it's not real, the fact that you're pretending it is makes Billy Bob happy. Normally you can eat bread and drink grape juice, and it's just food and drink to nourish your body. But when you're pretending, then it's Billy Bob's body and blood. When you pretend to eat Billy Bob and drink his blood, you have to be careful how you do it. You can't be thinking about what you're going to eat for dinner or some TV show you're interested in. You have to think about Billy Bob and how he died and rose for you, because without his death and resurrection, he refuses to forgive you of all the things you do that he doesn't like. Even if you do eat Billy Bob and drink his blood, which makes him happy, if you do it in a way he doesn't like, you'll be damned just like an unbeliever. You see, we can't please Billy Bob. His demands are above our pay grade. It's impossible for us to be good enough to satisfy him. So he decided that we, as humans, could murder him and then pretend to eat him, like Jeffrey Dahmer did his murder victims, but in reality, and drink his blood. For some reason, that makes Billy Bob happy. No, it wouldn't make you and me happy, but we're a far lower morality and intelligence. We don't understand how these magic cures work. This eating of others is not unusual at all and shouldn't cause us to turn up our noses. It's actually a very ancient custom. The eating and drinking of flesh and blood in hopes of gaining virtue is a relic of the savage rite of amophagia, I forgot to look up how to pronounce that word, which is the eating and drinking of another person's or animal's flesh and blood to acquire his or her qualities, strength, courage, and so on. So eating Billy Bob helps us to be like him, which is what we want, and more importantly, what he wants. All Billy Bob wants is himself. He wants little robots that are just like him. Of course, although he calls us brothers and sisters, we still must be his slaves and do his will, not our own. Savage rites are really nice. Sacrificing children to the gods always helped people to live better lives, for instance. If it didn't, why would the people have kept doing it? Think, people. Billy Bobbians and others have gone further and started eating gods instead of humans, which is far better. The worshippers of Osiris, for instance, ritually ate bread and drank wine, believing they were mystically the flesh and blood of Osiris. The cakes of Isis given by the priests were taken to the homes of those who were unable to attend the worship service, a practice of some churches even today, or at least in my lifetime. I don't know if they still do it. Pythagoras, circa 570 BCE, also performed and partook of this ritual long before Jesus came on the scene. And Tertullian wrote that the worshippers of Mithra partook of the Eucharist. The following is written regarding the Mithraic Eucharist. He who will not eat of my body and drink of my blood, so that he will be made one with me and I with him, the same shall not know salvation. Now this is not Billy Bob saying this. This is Mithra. So we shouldn't worry about doing something like this. It's a good thing to do. Wine and bread were used as well in the worship of Adonis. And as Lloyd Graham noted, every race of antiquity had its equivalents. Thomas W. Doane confirmed this with the following words. In fact, the communion of bread and wine was used in the worship of nearly every important deity. So, eating and drinking Billy Bob isn't weird at all. Obviously, there are always naysayers, as I mentioned in my earlier video about Billy Bob. Cicero, for instance, who was the greatest Roman orator and one of Rome's most illustrious statesmen, mentioned it in his writings, and as we might, he wondered at how strange a rite it was. He wrote, "How can a man be so stupid as to imagine that which he eats to be a god?" There has been an esoteric meaning attached to the eating of gods from the first establishment of the mysteries among the pagans. And the Eucharist is one of the oldest rites of antiquity, so there's Cicero. You know how things go, though. A younger generation comes along thinking they know better than their ancestors. They got rid of animal sacrifice. They got rid of human sacrifice. They got rid of slavery. First thing you know, they'll probably try to get rid of our consumption of Billy Bob. They have forgotten the old paths that they were told to walk in. They see these wonderful ancient customs as being unhelpful, helpful, or even wicked. Imagine that. By the way, Billy Bob wants you to hate your family. But what's family anyway? Our earthly family means nothing. What's important is Billy Bob and doing what he wants, such as eating him. We should care more about obeying him by eating him and having his flesh and blood in us. His flesh and blood. Familial flesh and blood are just temporary. That's of this wicked world. Oh, and everybody else who loves and eats Billy Bob. They're more important than our biological family, too. We have to give them preference over our biological family. They're of like precious faith. As I said, I know this sounds strange to us, but that's just because we're depraved and immoral and care too much about things of the world. We have to be strong for Billy Bob. We have to hate those who hate Billy Bob and count them as our enemies. We have to kill even our children if he tells us to. After all, if they're young enough and haven't reached the age of accountability, they'll go live with Billy Bob. And that's even better than being alive here on earth. And think of how murdering our children will benefit us in the long run. Isn't it better to murder your child if it helps you? Pleases Billy Bob? I mean, yeah, your child will be dead, but Billy Bob will be happy. And he'll be nice to you. Nothing could be better than that. And then Billy Bob gets all that worship you give him forever. That's the most important thing. We need to follow Billy Bob and do as he commanded. If we do everything he wants, then after we die, he'll bring us back alive and allow us to worship him forever. Actually, we'll just never die. I know it sounds untrue, but Billy Bob said it, I believe it, and that settles it. And really, I think that's an amazing deal. If we do what Billy Bob wants now, after we die, or don't die, we get to keep doing what Billy Bob wants forever and ever. It means I don't get to do anything I want now, and I never get to do anything I want. Why would I want to do what I want anyway? Who wants to do what they want? That's stupid. Better to do what Billy Bob wants, no matter how weird or horrible it seems to us. We're not capable of directing our own steps. I hope I've explained Billy Bob's story well so that you know that although you may be shocked by some of his wishes and commands, they are truly the most beautiful things in the world. All the prejudice and murder and slavery and eating Billy Bob, it's holy and just and pure and lovely and of good report. Surely you see that. If not, you're just carnal. You're a natural man. And we know the natural mind can't understand the things of the Spirit. There's one more thing I need to tell you that's really inconsequential. Remember Abe, that good friend of Billy Bob's? Recall how Billy Bob promised blessings throughout all the generations of his children? Well, eventually Billy Bob turned his back on Abe and his family. He told them their house was empty, and he left them in the hands of their enemies. But, you know, he would never do that to you and me, right? It was okay for him to turn his back on the descendants of Abe and not protect them from their enemies. I mean, if you think not, you just don't understand how evil those people were. Or maybe you're taking the whole thing out of context. Now, I know that Billy Bob can't see the future. If he could, as I said, he would have no regrets. He didn't know what King Saul or the early people would do, so he regretted making the people and putting Saul in as king and promising Abe something he couldn't give him. Obviously, he doesn't know what any of us would do to cause him to break his covenant with us. Still, surely he won't mess up again. He's no doubt learned his lesson about making promises he can't keep. Of course, Billy Bob is a liar. He admitted that himself, so I'm not bearing false witness or anything. That means he could just be blowing smoke about the whole salvation thing. That is, if he were you or me. Billy Bob gets to lie because he is the truth. If you're truth, then your lie is not a lie. Surely everybody understands that. Truth can't be a lie. That's nonsensical. We'll be fine. I don't think we have to worry as long as we eat Billy Bob and drink his blood and do everything he says. I know that will be impossible since, as I said, we can't really please him. But he'll overlook us if we believe in him and at least try to do as many of the things as we can. Now, that didn't work for Abe's family, but I have faith that it'll work for us. Of course, it is true that the slightest indiscretion will get us damned. For instance, if we whisper about our neighbors or backbite against them, or if we whine about the president chosen by Billy Bob for us, and he does choose our president, or speak badly about Billy Bob's choice of any leader, we'll be damned. Honestly, I don't know how any of us will make it, but Billy Bob wants only the best of the best. So we have to make sure that's you and me. Everybody else be damned. Well, I have to make sure it's me anyway. As I heard a preacher say one time, if only one person makes it into Billy Bob's kingdom, I want it to be me. Not my spouse, not my children, but me. We have to be completely self-centered regarding the afterlife. As Pippi Longstocking said to Tommy and Annika, at parties like this, you probably have to be very grabby. It's okay to stomp on anybody in order to get to Billy Bob. The most important thing, of course, is that Billy Bob is always gazed upon lovingly and told how great and awesome he is. He is super needy of praise all day long and every day of the week, especially on Sunday. Honestly, I think our belief and praise are why he is still alive. Otherwise, why would it be so important to him? Remember Tinker Bell from Peter Pan? She was near death, but when the children kept saying they believed, their belief eventually healed her and kept her alive. I think that's how it works with gods and other magic beings. Our belief in them is why they exist. So we have to keep saying over and over and over, I do believe in Billy Bob. I do. Now, Those who don't believe, well, obviously they'll be damned, which we know is what they will deserve. After all, they know about the good news of Billy Bob. The invisible things about him are proven by the things that are made, so they have no excuse. Also, those of us who believe in Billy Bob tell them about him all the time. Day in and day out, we quote from Billy Bob's book. And yes, we try to force the book's words on them. Why wouldn't we? It's for their own good and because we love them and don't want to see harm come to them at the hands of our loving and forgiving Billy Bob. And yes, the book is inconsistent and contradictory and even has mistakes and different copies say different things. But we know Billy Bob watched over it and made sure we have everything we need that pertains to life and godliness. And even those awful things that make us shake in our boots and have to fight with ourselves every night to convince ourselves that Billy Bob is actually good and not evil, well, there's a simple solution for that. Who are we to judge Billy Bob? And the punishment on the unbelievers will be eternal too, because Billy Bob never changes his mind or regrets anything. Okay, not very often anyway. Some claim that being damned means these people will die, and some that Billy Bob will punish them forever with flame and fire. Billy Bob's book is a little confusing on that point, but whichever it is, it will be totally righteous and holy and good. No need to question Billy Bob about whether his wonderful and loving punishment, be it annihilation or endless torture, is justified. We already know it is. Why? I'll let Billy Bob answer that. Because I said so. Anyway, it's no skin off our backs if the loving and compassionate Billy Bob sees fit to crush some of his Lego pieces. One thing we know, unbelievers will be cast from the presence of Billy Bob, who is everywhere. So I guess they can't really be cast from his presence, even though they will be. Listen, Billy Bob works in mysterious ways, which are past finding out. Or maybe this is just one of those many things you have to have the spirit of Billy Bob's dad in you to understand. So I don't expect you to get it till you become a Billy Bobian. Of course, you can't really believe in Billy Bob unless you already have the spirit of Billy Bob's daddy in you. Nobody can say that Billy Bob is Lord except by the spirit of his dad. And you can't get his dad's spirit until you believe. And some even say you must be baptized to get it, which you wouldn't do, of course, unless you already believe in Billy Bob, which you can't do without the spirit that you can't get. But hey, it might not matter anyway. Billy Bob's book says all liars go into the lake of fire and brimstone. And since, as I said, Billy Bob is a liar, that means he ought to go there too. Of course, he probably won't, because he's Billy Bob and gets to do all the horrible things we aren't allowed to do. Anyway, I hope you will worship Billy Bob. Where else can you go but to him? He has the words of eternal life. I wish I could think of a way to tell you about Billy Bob so that you would have no doubts and you would turn your will over to him. Oh, a light bulb just came on in my head. I figured out how to help you understand. Just pretend Billy Bob's name is Jesus. Ah, now you get it. It all suddenly makes perfect sense. And my work is done. Thank you all. Bye.